Thanks so much for joining me, everyone. It's Wednesday after 2.5 weeks of working every day or doing a Republican convention. I'm finally home, baby. Woo! Only to go back to work tomorrow, but that's okay. I actually get to see my wife tonight. I'm in one of those weird relationships where I still like my wife. I don't know that you could say the same thing to her. She would say she still enjoys me. But who cares about her feelings? I like hanging out with her. That's all that matters, right? So now I'm excited. I'm in a good mood. I was kind of stressed out all week, doing political stuff. Look, it gets on you, man. I think it's important. I enjoy doing it, but it gets unfun for me as well. You think I just want to sit around and argue politics with people all day? No, not all the time. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But it gets tough, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of the rigors of that, and especially how it could get on you if things aren't going good in your life. I'm one of the luckiest, most privileged people in the world because I have such a great family around me, such great friends, such a great community, and, you know, we're having a crazy time for our country, which I deeply care about my country, but at the same time, you know, I'm going to be a dad for the first time. My life's going better than it ever has, despite, you know, having to work a lot. I don't care. I'm ecstatic. So it's a weird juxtaposition. So I can understand if people were having trouble in their personal life, in addition to like being locked down because of COVID, seeing all the political strife in the country. I could see how it could get on you on the right or the left, and how it could, affect your psyche. And it's really something to consider. And I was starting to feel it a little later in this week where it was like, man, I really haven't seen my wife for over a week. It was getting, I don't know. It was getting crappy. So I'm excited. I'm in a better mood today. Now, as always, these Wednesday shows, I just got off work. My preparation for the show is basically nil, so I apologize for that. Hey, if you donate to me and I would be able to do this more full time, I'm this good, basically flying off the cuff. Imagine how great I would be if I actually had time to prepare. Something to think about to those considering donating to me. So, if you saw the debate I did Monday, I'll be talking about that a little as well. But just some context going into that debate. I had no idea what the topic was until probably 40 minutes before the debate, because how it goes is the people that reached out to me are very kind. And Prime K's, who runs that channel, I think is a good guy too. So they were reaching out to me for weeks. Can you do this debate? Can you do a debate? Can you do a debate? And Dylan, who did that debate as well, his channel, Dylan Burns TV, he's been reaching out to me generously for Friday debates. And I've been so busy I couldn't do it. I do apologize. I'm a man of the people. I believe in dialogue. I believe that my arguments, I am principled enough that I don't have to run from debates with people. Now, there are times I don't feel like doing it. And I'm not saying if you're the type of person that doesn't want to get in debates, that makes you a bad person. I'm not saying any of that. But I enjoy debate. It was something I did. I was a debate coach. I was a debater in university. And I am confident in my position, so I'm willing to talk to anyone as long as it's perceivably in good faith. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Whatever. I got a little bit of free time, so I did it. Now what comes is a downside to that is you oftentimes get bogged down in some crazy situations with some crazy people with arguments. I'm not saying those people that were on that panel, but I'm just saying it could happen. If you're willing to have a debate with anyone, like there are nights I'll be doing this show late at night and someone will be like, yeah, I want to call in and talk to you. And you get some of the craziest things you could ever imagine, or just engaging with people in the chat. I had some neo-Nazi types the other day telling me that I'm going to burn in hell. Like, how do you have a serious conversation with these people? So, it could get on you. But the other downside is if you're willing to take a debate like that off the top of your cuff, it's hard to have specific evidence, right? Because there's literally a million things that someone could come at me with. Like, what about your position on this? And, if you're talking about crime statistics or economics or, things like that, UN reports, I'm criminally ill-read, so I should read way more. So I'm not one of these people that, has a photographic memory that reads a ton. I should read more, but, I'm working 100 hours a week and I like hanging out with my friends and family. So, I don't get paid for this. I get some generous donators, but that's about it. It's not my job to do this full time. I just do it because I want to be a voice for people that I feel like don't have a voice. So, having said all that, we'll get into that debate. I'm biased, so I admit that. But if I had to rate who I thought the best debate performer was, I would say me by a landslide. Bam! As usual. Now, I thought that, I really enjoyed the discussion with Dylan on Syria in the third hour of that debate. But other than that, I thought that I was right, as is usually the case. And debates like that, I'll get to more in a second of what's going on with that. So, yeah, the big news before I get into, since I don't really have a plan here, I'll just talk until my wife gets home, and then I will probably not be doing videos the rest of the week until my radio show Saturday. There is an enormous development on the local story. I don't know what I'm at liberties to say, so I'm not going to talk about that development on this show. It will be discussed Saturday, though. My co-host on my radio show, Carlos Saldivia and Todd Bartley, those two have been integral in a story. Todd is actually a journalist. That's what he does. Carlos is a political consultant. They've been integral in a local story in Williamsport that we talk about on our radio show a lot that has to do with sexual assault that occurred during a baseball trip, on a high school baseball trip to Myrtle Beach, and the cover-up that resulted from that, from people that were involved with that. It's a crazy story. It really is. I have an outsider's perspective on it, so I'm not saying that it's something that I see firsthand, that I have a lot of firsthand knowledge, but I listen to the story, and I try to be as objective as possible, and then I try to bring an outsider's perspective to rein them in, because they'll be talking about these local characters, and I'm like, whoa, me and the rest of the audience has no clue what you're talking about. There has been a development in that story that it's unbelievable, and it has to do with the personal safety of some of the people reporting on that story. So that'll be coming up Saturday. I think our entire show, it's such a, like, I know it's a tease. I would tell you, I'm not just teasing you to get viewers. That's not what I'm doing. I have not talked to Carlos and Todd, and it affects their lives. And so I don't want to speak before they get a chance to speak the story, since they're a first-hand source and I'm second-hand. So until I talk to either of them, I will not be bringing that information to my audience. But it is unbelievable and grotesque. So that's something to look forward to Saturday. We'll probably be spending a lot of time on that story. Before I get into the debate and then just things I found on Twitter for the week that are worth talking about, let's talk about, I guess, some of the news of the day. The big thing would be the convention. It's terrible. Now, I'm biased. The Democrat convention was going to be a difficult sell for me one way or the other. But one of the big reasons that it's terrible isn't even the fault of the Democrats. So I think that it's worth saying that. We as a society have still not figured out how to do events without live audiences. So we're so conditioned. It's like the old laugh track on television. The first few comedies you saw without the laugh track, you didn't know what to do, just inside yourself. And I feel like it's like that with these live events. I used to watch a lot of professional wrestling. I haven't done so for probably over a decade, but I have friends that still do, and they're just like, man, if you watch these wrestling events now without a crowd, like the entire activity of professional wrestling was playing to the crowd. Politics is like that a lot as well. What's up, Mod? What's up, DM? Thanks for being here. So I do want to say, look, I despise the Democratic Party, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the cringeworthiness of it, I think does have to do with, we'll see if the Republicans can do it any better, I guess is what I'm saying. I think it's just tough for them to do something like this, just because it's so new. But boy, was it bad. I mean, it's just bad. I don't have a lot to add on the Democratic convention that you haven't heard elsewhere. Here's one thing that I want to talk about that I haven't heard other people talk about. So I wrote in 2016, I was on this website Above Top Secret, and so I wrote a lot of political stuff there. And I remember writing a big post, and it was about the idea that the Democrats and the national media were calling the Republican convention dark. And that was the word they used over and over. Now, I do have to give props to the establishment, and that includes the Democrats, their media propagandists, which is almost the entirety of the media, academia, Silicon Valley. They're all very good at getting the talking points and sticking on message. And they're also good at coming up with trigger words or words that are very important that put an image in your head. And if you want to hear more about that type of stuff, you could listen to Scott Adams, who I really appreciate. He's the writer of the Dilbert comics, but he does a Periscope every week and you can find, or every day, and you can find his videos on YouTube too. He talks a lot about the importance of words, like blunder. He's been talking about that, why that's strategically chosen. Dark was one of those words. Dark. Oh, the Republicans are just dark. The Republican convention is dark. And I remember asking at the time, like, what makes the Republican convention dark? What does that mean? And then when you ask people, they'd be like, well, because Trump's talking about all these problems with the country. But isn't that the nature of every political convention? Right? Every political convention, especially if you're not the incumbent, you're going to say the incumbent's doing a bad job. You're not going to win if you have a convention and you're like, things are great. Oh man, Obama's doing great. The Democrats are killing it. Hillary's probably going to do excellent. Like, you're going to paint a dark story, of course. And by the way, Hillary and the Democrats in the DNC convention in 2016 were doing the exact same thing. So they would look at Trump and they would say, oh, look at how he's causing divisiveness. He's painting a bad picture of what will happen economically, for example, if we don't vote for him. Meanwhile, the Democrats were saying we're all dead in 10 years if we don't vote for them from climate change. How isn't that dark? But some of that was considered a message of hope, inspiring. Well, the same thing now applies today. Like, listen to how the Democrats, particularly at this convention, are speaking about our country right now and speaking about Trump. Now, is that a dark message? I mean, they're all but calling him Hitler. Even Michelle Obama's speech was how bad he's doing for the country. Is that dark? Is that what's going on here? Notice how the media is not saying that. And so this is a trick. When you control the narrative, this sort of stuff happens all the time, right? Where you control the narrative to say, oh, my side does the exact same thing as the other side, but we'll just spin why it's good when my side does it and bad when the other side does it. That's why Republicans and conservatives have made such a mistake. Actually, sorry, I don't, Salam Ben Mami, I don't speak a second language, unfortunately. Unless you're talking drunken redneck, I could probably interpret that with a couple beers. But I could talk about Turkey. I'll get to Turkey in the debate here. So, yeah, I'll get to that. You're Turkish. Congrats. Anywho, to further go on. So, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. So we can see there is no darker, and this has always been the case, there is no darker political party than the establishment Democrat Party. Everyone who disagrees with them is a racist. What gets darker than that? I still talk to people that were convinced, and still convinced, if Trump won the first time, or if he wins again, he'll lock gay people up just for being gay. I hear that from friends of mine that are gay. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's the first Republican that's flown the gay pride flag at his convention. Like, he's appointed gay ambassadors. I don't see anything he's remotely suggested saying he'll criminalize homosexuality. I see the Democrats speaking up for Islamic countries that do that. But I don't see that with Trump. Where's that at? Even if you say, well, that's traditionally what Republicans want to do. Again, being against gay marriage, which, by the way, I'm for gay marriage, but being against gay marriage was a far cry from actually criminalizing homosexuality. So I don't get where this comes from. That's dark. You know, claiming that the people that support the other party are all racist or all 10-tooth rubes, that's dark. But we never hear that, do we? Annie Chris Bendy on Periscope says, what's normal America? Obese, lazy, buy it all slobs like you, educated enough to sign for credit. Thanks, Annie. Glad to be here. Probably a progressive virtue signaler that would yell about anyone that, quote, fat shamed people or that used misogynistic language. You always see this from these people. It's one of the things I find funny. For your information, Annie, I routinely tell people to fat shame me because I'm trying to lose weight, and I'm not such a crybaby victim that says, oh my God, someone called me a mean name. In fact, I encourage insults at me as long as they're original. You seem to be doing a poor job of it, but what would one expect from an anonymous person on Periscope? How brave you are. You're probably a really good moral person, though, right? I bet all your Facebook friends think you're so hip and cool because you talk about Black Lives Matter all the time. You don't actually know anything, and you don't have anything productive to say, but who needs that when you get those sweet, sweet virtue signal points, right? But, hey, thanks for watching anyways. You still increase my viewership, so good job. So, be gone, troll. I'll no longer respond to you unless you say something I find interesting. But that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up about this convention is how I thought, particularly, I was like, yeah, even Michelle Obama, who I objectively said I thought Michelle Obama gave the best speech of either convention in 2016. Not the best speech in terms of I agreed with her, but as far as me understanding it as a persuasive speech, I thought that it was really good. Oh yeah, thanks, Wild Saffron. I would prefer if you could watch me on D Live as opposed to YouTube because, yeah, YouTube, shadow bans, censors, demonetizes. D Live doesn't do any of that. So yeah, thanks for following me on D Live. And for those of you that are watching on multiple platforms, you can find me at Normal America with Rob Noor on Twitch TV. You can find me at Robert Noor on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube at Normal America with Rob Noor. And you can find me on D Live at Normal America. So thanks so much. You can go Periscope and be anonymous and call me fat and stuff. Notice, you want to know how little I care about people insulting me for being fat? Bam! Horizontal stripes. How many fat guys, are comfortable wearing horizontal stripes? This guy don't mind. If I was trying to be slimming, I'd wear the vertical stripes, right? Link my D Live. Okay, 1 second. Just give me a second. If y'all don't mind, I could actually put up... Oops. I think somewhere I have... I used to have mods, which are the best mods in the business, and it's not their fault. DM Demod was on here earlier. What I do, which is terrible for my mods, is because of my 2-job situation now, I don't have a consistent schedule, so my poor mods never get to be on here. But they are great. So thank you to all my mods. I will link my D Live, though, in the chat. So... Annie's saying something again on Periscope, but it's not interesting enough to care. She doesn't believe in Black Lives Matter. Good job. You did it. I'm a real fountain of no. This is something, actually, I will bring it up, Annie. Thank you again for posting. So I think some of these trolls are actually friends of mine that know that it makes my show better to come on and type stuff that's obviously so ludicrous that I can make them look stupid. So Annie says, I never really buy that Black Lives Matter bollocks, but you are a real fountain of no real info. So imagine, let's say that's true, and that could very well be true. So I guess what matters is subjectively the people watching. So basically what Annie's doing is saying, hey, I'm watching someone. Hey, what's up, Endernax? Thanks for being here. I was going to talk a little about the debate here later. Endernax, who's on Twitch right now, check out his channel on Twitch TV. He's a conservative. Now, and by the way, I wanted to talk to you, Endernax, about something later. I'll get to it. But yeah, if you're on twitch.tv, you can search some of the people that were on that panel with me. So Endernax was a person. I think we had some agreements and disagreements, but largely I think we agreed on a lot of the issues. And he's kind of a conservative. One of the things that I really like about him is he's willing to criticize his own side, which I think is something that's very important. So please check that channel out if you could. It's Endernax, so that's spelled Endernax. So you can check him out on Twitch TV. And I think he streams a lot more than me. So maybe if I'm someone you like, you'll like his channel and you'll actually be able to get more content because he usually has more time, usually is putting more effort and time into his, I don't know about effort. Well, let me not sell myself too short, but definitely putting more time into his channel. So anyways, Annie on Periscope, just real quick, maybe I'm worthless, fat, slob, blah, 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 who's a fountain of no real info. All of that could be true. I won't even deny it. But I still think that would put me ahead of someone who's actively watching a worthless, fat slob with no real info. So good job. Not the brightest people sometimes that want to criticize me. Yeah, that's what I thought largely of the Democrat convention. There were obvious things. I thought Michelle Obama's speech was okay persuasively. I did. And look, if you're a conservative out there and your argument is that Michelle Obama or Barack Obama aren't good speakers, you're lying. They are fantastic speakers. Now, I know the argument you'll make. Yeah, in front of a teleprompter. So that's 95% of their speaking engagements. That's great. I mean, they sound good, and that matters. Now, you might say in a perfect system, only your policies would matter and not your likability. Yeah, well, we don't have a perfect system. And it matters that Michelle Obama sounds good. She does. But I thought that her 2016 was far better than her 2020 speech. And I'm saying that as someone who disliked the message of both of them. But just as far as persuasiveness goes, it's hard to sell the when they go low, we go high message when there are so many riots that we see going out there. And, just objectively, even if you say, well, the riots are only a small percentage, I disagree with that. But even if you have that mentality, we don't even have to look at the riots. You could just look at the hatred and vitriol that are coming out of many of the protesters, even that aren't rioting, and many of the Democrats themselves that are in Washington to see. Even if you think the Republicans are worse, I disagree. But even if you thought that, it's clear that the message of the Democratic Party at this point isn't when they go low, we go high. I mean, so it's a hard sell on that message right now. I get that they're going to try to sell that to sound like they have some more moral high ground, but they don't. They don't. And, and then the big faux pas she makes is complaining about kids in cages when it was her husband and the most liberal court in the land that actually set the policy that led to those kids being forced in cages. And it was her husband's administration that built those cages that first housed kids in it. And it gets a little galling. I don't mind people making arguments from the context of whether or not something's a good idea, the practical nature of something. That's fine. You could argue against that all you want. But what I don't get is people that make these moral superior arguments and then are total hypocrites. So I think you could say, yeah, okay, Obama had kids in cages, but I think Trump did it worse and it's something that we should rectify. It's a really bad thing. That's a fair argument. I don't know the truth of that as far as how many exactly were there when Obama was there versus Trump. I'm not talking about the numbers. But that statement is grounded in good faith and I think reasonable. But what I don't get is someone that stands, you could never support someone who would put kids in cages. Barack Obama was the greatest president in the history of the world. He put kids in cages. Well, it was okay. No. And Michelle Obama? Come on. It's ridiculous. So, that's what I thought basically about the convention. I thought it was silly. The Republican will probably be silly without an audience, hopefully not as bad. I thought Michelle probably had the best speech. I know there's all kinds of things people want to talk about, like things that Bernie said, AOC nominating Bernie. That was kind of a procedural thing. Though it was telling she didn't mention the name Joe Biden. Clearly, let's just be honest. Can I catch up on the comments? Sure, if someone said something. It's a classic story. People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Oh yeah, right. You're right. Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I only engage. Trust me, I don't leave the insults get me down. They're just fun to talk about. And one of the great things. Look, there's a lot of censorship that occurs, and there's a lot of bad things that go on with social media. But let me just say, one of the positives with social media is it does give you a foothold, at least in the beginning, to get your voice out there. And I think it's funny how many tough guy keyboard warriors, they're not willing to put their face or real name out there. So it's telling. Okay. So let's get into the debate I had Monday. I don't know if Endernax is still here, but there were a litany of people. So let me talk about, and this is something I have to say at the front of any of describing these debates is, by the way, you can find this debate on my channel from just the other day. It's 3.5 hours long, so it's a lot to get through. I don't know that I say a word in the first 45 minutes, so good luck. I have to say this every time. I really dislike the way these panels are put together. I understand why they're put together the way they are. Because if you bring a bunch of people, particularly like if you're a small to a mid channel, maybe you have like 1,000 subscribers and you get 2 people that could come on your channel that each have 50,000 subscribers, then maybe it could bring more attention to you. I understand that, right? Fine, no problem. But 8 people's too much. I just think it's too much. And I'd like to say there were people, a couple, Mabasi was one of the gentlemen's name. There was a girl named Liz. I felt like they didn't get to say much. Now, I think both admitted afterwards a lot of the topics they weren't super interested in. But it becomes kind of like halfway through it, I, in my head, adopt the position like, I'm just going to have to interject. I'm going to have to basically be rude, which is the first thing I'm trying not to do. I'm trying to be polite and hear everyone out. But I'd say something like I'd listen to someone talk for 30, a group of people talk for 30 minutes. And I'd be like, well, here's the first thing I have to say about that. Actually, I think you're seeing a lot of fake pictures about this USPS scandal. 10 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, I have about 40 minutes worth of stuff I'd like to say. That was probably the least important. I just thought that would a 10-second intro that we could all agree, so it was like, ugh. And it's not just me. Look, I run my mouth a lot too, so I'm sure some of the other people are like, shut up, Rob. I'd like to get a word in edgewise. So you can't even really fault the participants. And I'm not faulting the people putting together the debate panel. It's just too much. That's just my personal opinion. And, Prime K's and a lot of other people invite me on their shows. They'll have open Discord channels. And, so they'll be like, yeah, come on anytime we can talk. And you'll go on, there'll be 12, 13, 14 people all talking. And it's very difficult, especially if you're in a position where most of the people disagree with your argument. Now, I'll debate 40 people at a time. I don't care. But all I ask is that my side's argument gets around the same amount of time as the other side's argument. Not me personally. If it's me and 5 Trump supporters on this channel and 1 Biden supporter, I would try my best to make sure that the Biden position got as much time as the Trump position, until you get to opening and closing statements. And oftentimes that's not the case. So that happens. And another thing that's unfortunate that happens is oftentimes what will happen, and I'm guilty of this as well, people will take the most ridiculous argument that someone on the panel says, and that becomes the entire argument. Then everyone's arguing over that most ridiculous. So, for example, one of the other conservatives on the panel, Lecture Fan, he says during the post office debate, he says something to the effect of, I think that we should be encouraging a system that says that only informed people should vote, and if you're not informed, don't go vote. Now, I didn't know what to make of that. After I kind of asked him a little and got to talk, he clarified. He wasn't saying that there should be legal blockades or a legal standard for you have to be this educated to vote or you have to be informed before you vote. He's just saying as a culture, we should tell people that are like, yeah, I don't know who to vote for, then don't vote. It's your duty as an American to try to get informed somewhat. And if you don't choose not to, then don't vote. And I agree with that. I remember the guys that do South Park, Trey Parker, I remember him saying this at one point. He was kind of mocking the MTV's Rock the Vote. And he's like, yeah, don't vote if you're voting because P. Diddy told you. That's not a reason to vote. So that's one of the, I agree with that position. Now there's problems with that. Who defines who's educated? Who defines who's informed? So even subjectively, there's problems. But in theory, I agree. It should be our duty. I ran for office. It was my duty as someone who was running for office to be as transparent as possible to let all the potential voters know, here's what I believe, here are the policies that I would try to implement. It's their duty to try to learn a little about me and the other candidates and pick the person they think's best. So we all have duties to be responsible citizens. And yeah, we all fail in those duties all the time. But that's the idea. And I don't have a problem saying that we should encourage that. But of course, it just became, do you want to have a literacy test? And it's like, come on. Now, he also said that he was against same-day voter registration and thought you should have to be registered for at least 90 days, I think, before you could vote. Look, there's questions as to whether or not that would be agreeable. I probably lean towards that argument that we shouldn't allow same-day voter registration because I think that the argument that the left just wasn't dealing with was that there's a total ignorance of the idea of potential election fraud. So for those of you who don't know, this was the 3 topics that went into this debate. One was, do you believe, due to the recent post office business, and this conspiracy about, Donald Trump crushing the post office so that people won't vote, do you think that it's the government's obligation or something like that to make voting as easy as possible for everyone? And the answer to that question is no. Period. Because voting needs to be a compromise of ease of access plus security. And so to make it as easy as possible for everyone to vote would be to eliminate any voter security, right? The easiest possible way would be a freaking Twitter poll or something. Just like, hey man, go on and just vote. You can click 1,000,000 times. It doesn't matter. Hey, it was easy to vote, right? All you have to do is go on and click. There you go. Well, we know how accurate those polls are. We know the potential for bots and all sorts of other things, right? So clearly we admit there has to be some security. However, you can't have the most possible security. You don't want to have to, go through an FBI background check and a blood test and, all of these tests 6 months before voting and then proceed to go in every month and have, 10 forms of ID and you got to do this, that, and that. And the other. We don't want that either. So there has to be a compromise, right? So all reasonable people, I think, would say, yeah, you don't want it to be as easy as possible. What you want is it to be as accessible to as many people as easily as possible while making sure that the voting is secured. Now, we will all have disagreements on where that line falls, but I think that's the default reasonable position. So the actual answer to the question they asked was no, which clearly then that said no win that debate easily. I don't think that there's no one even remotely tried to argue against it. It's just, but if I could criticize my leftist friends that would say, yes, it is responsible, I oftentimes think that they're in a situation like that, they're thinking more with their feelings than actually logically. And so if you're just thinking, yes, of course, it would be good to want as many people to vote as possible. I agree with them. It would be. But you have to understand there needs to be security issues as well. And it's amazing to me. I know one of the things that I try to do, and if there's a lesson I could, like, that I think makes me, I don't think I'm great or anything like that. I don't think sorry, I'm missing a lot of the comments. So I'll try to get to some of them later here, but I'm kind of on a roll. So, what was I saying? One of the things that I think makes me successful, at least more successful than I otherwise would be, is I think a mistake that people often make is that they have a position and they don't know how to articulate that position to disparate groups. So let me give you an example. I believe in the legalization of marijuana. I think the drug war is a disaster. Now, not every Republican agrees with that. In fact, I know some Republicans, which I won't mention by name, but in my life that are appalled, that I know in my personal life that are appalled that I believe that, okay? So one of these people confronted me one time and was like, Rob, please tell me, you don't believe in the legalization of marijuana, do you? I was like, yeah, I do. It would be unethical for me to not tell the truth there. Now, maybe I won't bring it up because I don't want a fight, but I didn't bring it up. This person did. And so what I understood was I told the truth, but I also tried to couch it in a way that made more sense to the person that I was dealing with. So I said, well, look, one of the big things about marijuana is it actually, the profits from it that these drug cartels make heavily go to child sex trafficking. It heavily goes to supporting terrorism and things like that. If the revenues that came from illegal sales of marijuana were taken away by legalizing and taxing it, that would do a big step into crushing child sex trafficking and terrorism. And then that person's like, oh, well, yeah, you know, that's something to think about. So I stood true to myself, but I have a ton of reasons why I believe that position, and I knew which reason would be most likely to resonate with that particular person in the audience. So let me show you how this occurs in like the debate I had the other day. One of the things you would want to say that why this sort of universal mail-in ballots are a bad thing is that the potential for fraud. And it's clear as day that there is an incredible potential of fraud. And we've seen it lining up just in the primaries this year of people accused of fraud, criminal cases being filed, things like that. The problem is I also know that the people I'm debating on the left are just going to say that's not true. That's not true. This is a Republican conspiracy. And then we'll spend an hour me saying, what about this case? And they'll be like, no. And we won't get anywhere. So how can I make my argument that there's questions about universal ballots through the mail without getting into this tooth-pulling, excruciating argument where, to me, it amounts to a denial of reality? Well, I thought, instead of talking about fraud, let's approach it from the other way. So the Democrats are a party that at least pays lip service to wanting more people to vote, right? And that's what they always say. That's why they're for all these measures. I know a lot of us on the right think, no, the reason is you want fraud. You want a potential for fraud. That's why you want to take away voter ID and things like that, because you want to legitimize possible fraud. Regardless, they at least pay lip service to, we should make it as easy as possible for as many people to vote, right? And everyone's vote should count. So if you could show that actually, even without fraud, and even many Democrats speaking up saying, actually, hundreds of thousands of ballots are lost every time we have an election in the mail. And that's certainly enough to swing an election. That's a persuasive argument because it's not implying nefarious Democrat. It's literally saying just general incompetence means that your chance of your vote being lost if you vote by mail is substantially higher than if you vote in person, right? But no, you can't even get that agreement. That's not true. The post office is great. And I'm like, here are the numbers. Here are Democrats complaining about it. Not true. Okay. And so that's sort of, but I tried to give an olive branch of like, I won't even talk about the fraud. We'll just talk about ballots that are lost. Nope, they don't get lost. So, I mean, yeah, Robert, I've come up for some air. I breathe quite well, thank you. Do I believe a person should join the military and serve and protect if it's right for them? So, So the point is this, and I've made this argument here, and this was the argument that I was making there that I don't feel was properly handled when it comes to the post service. Well, there were several arguments. They didn't answer anything. My friend Endernax that was on here, this was a topic we agreed on. I thought that he cited articles right out of the gate that showed how U.S. Postal Service has been on the decline for years. Obama removed a bunch of mailboxes. Obama removed a bunch of mail sorting machines. The reason that there's a lack of funding going to the post office right now is because their volume is way down because of COVID, and that this has been occurring for years. Locks on mailboxes and things like that, and removal of mailboxes also been occurring for years, etc., etc. The two arguments I had in addition to that I didn't feel were handled were, one, if it's true that this was foreseeable and Donald Trump is engaged in some act of corruption by sabotaging the Postal Service during the times of an election where people will have to vote by mail because of COVID, why, oh why, did the Democrats not include in one of their budget proposals, their emergency spending bills, that were trillions of dollars? Why did they never once suggest increasing funding to the Post Service? They couldn't see it last month? So what? All of a sudden in a month's time, the Post Service went for something that wasn't even relevant of a discussion during times in $1 trillion package to send them any money, to now it's the most important thing in the country? Ridiculous. And of course, they didn't answer that. They just totally ignored. So it proves that this was never a legitimate concern. This was just Russiagate 2.0. It's just more garbage. That's what it is. Right? So no one answered that. And the second point, which I haven't heard anyone else in the country say, is this. So we already talked about how we know that ballots can be lost. Again, I believe that there's fraud. The propensity for fraud is incredible if we have universal mail-in ballots. However, for the sake of arguing with my leftist friends here, let's forgo that for a second, right? So let's just talk specifically about whether or not it's more likely that your vote will be counted just out of incompetence, or just things getting lost in the mail, or people filling out ballots wrong, or stamps wrong, or return addresses wrong, etc. All the litany of things, put a date that was wrong, etc., that could occur with mailing your ballot in. I don't think it's a controversial position to show that voting in person is actually a far more successful way to make sure that your vote is heard. I don't think that's controversial. So once we agree with that, and then we see that Dr. Fauci, who the left cites as, he's the premier expert, he says there's no reason people can't vote in person. Yes, I know. He went on to say, unless you have comorbidities, etc. But isn't that what the absentee ballot system always is? The people that are too infirm to actually make it to vote get an absentee ballot. No one's suggesting that should change this year, and no one's suggesting that those absentee ballots would overwhelm the system. What they're saying would be overwhelmed is if we change the votes to everybody gets a mail-in ballot. And that would be a disaster. Not only the potential for fraud, but we're leaving that out in the context of this debate just for the amount of ballots that would be lost that could potentially be enough to swing an election. And so, given that we are making the argument that Donald Trump, for not funding the post office more, that implies, he must know that the majority of ballots that would go through the mail would be against him. That's why he's intentionally sabotaging the post system. If that's an argument you believe, why couldn't I make the exact counter argument? Well, okay, if we're going to play that game, it is the Democrats that are dissuading people from voting in person. The same Democrats that are saying you could go out physically and protest the Postmaster General, but you can't go out physically and vote. So Democrats are dissuading people from the most effective type of voting, that the chance of their voice of being heard is the highest. They're dissuading people from that. At the very least, wouldn't it be a wash? If you were upset for Trump for possibly restricting mail-in voting, wouldn't you be upset with the Democrats for possibly restricting in-person voting? Or at least strongly dissuading against it? But no. Of course not. So that was kind of the ridiculous nature of that argument. I was just like, and I didn't think, they didn't respond to any of it. Instead, it just got to a big yelling conversation about whether or not you should have to be educated to vote. And that's another thing I want to say here. So oftentimes you have people that will be characters, and I'm the same way. You watch my show, I raise my voice and yell and sometimes like that. 99.9% of that is totally authentic. In fact, I would say that's the only thing I have on this channel is my authenticity. Not the smartest guy, not the best looking guy, but I am authentic. So, you get what you get from me. I'll criticize anyone who I think deserves it, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, etc. So, but I'll yell sometimes, I've done it. And I thought it was funny because, a couple of the left-wing comments that I saw was like, oh, Rob's a reasonable guy. Like, maybe if you watch my channel, you wouldn't think so much because I was polite on there. And I usually am more polite when I'm dealing with an actual person than when I'm just sitting here ranting and raving myself. By the way, if you're typing YouTube comments, I don't know that I could see them. Let me check real quick. Something that... Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Whoopsie. I'm so sorry to everyone that was on YouTube. I wasn't able to read any of your comments. Restream just is terrible. Yeah, my mic problems are doing better. Right. The USPS, and everybody knows this, right? And the best comment I saw on this, which I wish I would have made, well, there's 2 additional comments that I did not make in the debate, so I can't fault anyone for not answering. But the 2 comments are, one, this is not me, but if Democrats are going to argue that the Postal Service is so effective, we should start paying Congress by cash through the mail. Right? What do you get, Congress? $2,000 something a week? Okay. We'll send that in an envelope. Make sure to put the change in there too so it's obvious there's cash in there. Send it through the mail. Oh, it got lost? Sorry, it can't. It couldn't have got lost. The post office is so good. The Postal Service is so great. Surely nothing will get lost, right? So let's see if they're willing to take their checks that way. I bet they'd say no, right? And the other thing is this, and this is, again, my thinking process on this. So if we take the original question, and it is, should the government make it as easy as possible for as many people to vote? Okay, so let's apply that to an argument that I talked about earlier in the year, which I also think I was one of the first people I heard talk about this. Isn't it convenient how much stuff the Democrats say they need to shut down, even when there's no evidence that the lockdown would help in that, such as schools? They're all for shutting down schools, even when they're experts like the CDC, Dr. Fauci, and others says, no, we should reopen schools. Still, when all the science is against them, they're like, no, lock down the schools. Lock down your ability to go to church, and lock down your non-essential business, and lock down the restaurants, and lock down the bars. All of this stuff. And when we say you can't go to your family's funerals or weddings, and when people speak up, they go, oh, you're just upset you can't get your hair cut? Right? Or they poo-poo you. They're like Governor Wolf said, my governor in Pennsylvania. What did he say to us? He said, you're cowards if you have a problem with the lockdowns. That's what he said. Right? And I said, isn't it convenient that everything, we have to sacrifice all these rights in pursuit of the greater good? We have to. Except one. And what was the right that it would be, they took away the First Amendment. Everybody with even a cursory knowledge of history knows one of the big reasons for the foundation of the United States, and it was included in the First Amendment because it was so important, was religious freedom. Yet they have no problem curbing your religious freedom. None during this pandemic. It's necessary. It's necessary. Your livelihood, no problem telling you have to sacrifice and you can't go to work. But what's the first thing they said unprompted? As soon as there was one thing that was like, oh, we're shutting things down. What did they say? You're shutting things down? Not the elections! You can't shut down the elections! Oh my goodness, whatever you do, you can't delay the elections. My God, you would be a tyrant and a dictator to try to delay the elections. Well, I find that you're a tyrant if you try to delay people going to church. You see, as soon as it potentially became an impediment to the Democrats potentially getting power, all of a sudden it's authoritarian and a dictatorship to ask sacrifices being made then. That's dictatorship. Oh, you can't do it. People's right to vote's sacred. Now, having said that, I didn't want the election delayed. I still don't want it delayed. But I can see the hypocrisy. Oh, so what the Democrats are telling you is your right to attend your mother's funeral? No, that's not important. Your right to go to church and worship as you see fit? No, that's not important. Your right to go to your job so that you could feed your family and pay your mortgage? Nah, that's not important. Their right to potentially get elected? Oh my God, that's the most important right ever. You can't impede that. Now, I talked about that, and I talked about the absurdity, and it shows that they're not really concerned. They're not concerned at all about people's safety. If they were, they would have said, we have to delay schools. We can't leave people in schools. We have to delay people going to church. We can't leave people there. And we'll have to delay the election until it's safe. But they didn't. And so going with this USPS story and the question that was in that debate, what I wanted to bring up if I had time was, if the answer to the question is yes, that it is our government's responsibility to make it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to vote, or for everyone to vote, that's what the question said, then why not delay the election? We've won the argument that mail-in ballots have up to a 7% chance of being lost, even without fraud, leaving fraud out of it. We know that in-person voting is more effective. It's the best possibility of your vote being counted. So why would we continue to have, if it's the government's responsibility to make sure that people could vote as easily as possible, why wouldn't we make sure that it occurs at a time that could make sure people show up in person as safely as possible? Why not? And they would yell and they would scream, oh, so you're with Trump. You want to delay the election. Oh, here we go. We knew that he wouldn't leave office peacefully. Oh, my goodness. No, I don't want him to delay the election. The point is, the fact that you're freaking out so much proves that you're willing to say, no, election security matters. That's what it proves. And I also made the comment, which Dylan correctly pointed out, I used the wrong word, but I find it funny that people that are unwilling to even acknowledge voter fraud exists, those people that are unwilling to say, oh, no, we should just send ballots to everyone, even though we know the voter registries are horrible. I get wrong mail in my box almost every day. What happens when my neighbor's ballot comes to me and I throw it away? I could see postal service workers who think that they've came out in support of Joe Biden as a union. So I could see these workers thinking, geez, if Donald Trump wins, I'm out of a job. If Joe Biden wins, I get a raise. What do you think they're going to do with those ballots that they see coming through? So when it comes to a question of, okay, well, people's votes might be, could definitely be fraud involved. And we see evidence of actual fraud that has occurred. The same people that say that's not possible, it never happens, oh my goodness, no. They don't care about that actual voting security, but they had meetings on Capitol Hill because some Russians put some memes on Facebook or on Pokemon Go. How do you explain that? So on one hand, the most benign, someone put a stupid meme up that barely anyone saw. Oh my God, that's attacking our elections. But sending ballots to voter registry rolls where millions of people will get the wrong ballot or dead people will get ballots and all this stuff, no problem. So it's nonsense. It's hypocrisy. So, okay. The second topic was suggested by Endernax, and it had to do with, how do I put this? Social media negatively affecting our children, particularly Instagram. This isn't a topic that I know a lot about, but he had read some scientific literature that showed the adverse effects that constant social media barrage and how the algorithms drives us towards things that will make people angry is having a psychological and an addictive effect on children. And so he recommended the government stepping in and forcing these social media companies to have better processes to make sure that our children aren't being harmed by them. And his like a real world implication he gave was like a kids only Instagram section and things like that. I don't have a problem with it. I don't. Unfortunately, I'm not educated enough to really speak on it, but I could say in the abstract, the free market person in me is like, whoa. Yeah, that gets to be a tenuous situation. But then like we wouldn't allow cigarette companies to market to children because it has addictive properties that lead to adverse health effects. So what matters if the addictive properties come via physiological method or via mental method? I don't know. It's an interesting question. And then even more on the nose, we don't allow porn companies to market directly to children. So if we could prove that there are adverse effects to young people through social media, why would there be no right to legislate through that? I don't know. And if you say there is no right, then I would guess you would say the same thing about the porn industry. So I don't know. But this changed into a discussion more about text censorship and things like this. And again, Lecture Fan, who was the other, Trump supporter on the panel, it seemed that it became. Oh, let me say, I Lecture Fan. I thought in the first topic they asked him if he supported a voter holiday, and he refused to answer. I don't know why. I thought it was dumb. He probably would say no, which I think is a mistake. But so yeah, I'm with you, DM. I think that they would love to advertise pornography to children. They don't care. Weed is great. So is beer, says Jeff TV. I'm a big beer guy. I can't say as much for weed. But I am for legalization of marijuana. So, right. Neither should be marketed to people that are still, yeah, that's true. So anyways, so the question then becomes, the greater question I think on this topic is, what is the government's role in regulation of social media? And it's tough because, again, if you're honest and you're conservative, you're probably a free market guy or girl, but then we have to look at, is this technically a monopoly? And I think that I'm with Tucker Carlson on this, that even though I'm predominantly free markets, once things get so bad, whereas, and no one answered this in the debate, that, Professor Robert Epstein testified in front of Congress with no real pushback that Google has the ability to sway 16 million votes. 16 million in the coming election. Once you see that, that's power that you can't imagine. That is, they will perpetually be able to pick the president of the United States every 4 years. Then what do we do? So it's clear that things have gotten so bad that there needs to be some sort of intervention. And it's clear that Google itself is unwilling as a company to intercede to stop this grotesque political propagandism. So I guess that it's the role of the government or, and this is something that we're going to see on the last topic that I talk about, you're going to start putting it in people's hands. And you don't want that. Neither do I. So, we'll see. Anyways, on this topic particular, thank you, Jeff. Jeff says he loves the show. Can't wait to see me to make it to D-Live Verified Partner. Me too. I can't wait. And thanks for helping me out, Jeff, with getting in with the affiliate already. So, I really appreciate that and some of the help that you gave me. So, one of the things that I think is funny is you saw, at least, there was tension and I like topics like that. Social media regulation and immigration, because what you often see is it's difficult to toe the party line if you're critically thinking. Because, for example, immigration is more about capitalism, and not marketing or not intervening on free markets also about capitalism. And oftentimes these are left-wing positions, or left-wing people that are taking what you would consider right-wing positions. So a left-wing person that's against evil corporations and capitalism, et cetera, all of a sudden is for immigration, particularly illegal immigration, because even though it allows these corporations to succeed through cheap exploitation of labor. So you're like, huh. And here it's like, oh, Rob's free market guy, but he's for government regulation of independent markets. I am, because I am free markets, but I'm not an anarchist. And I believe that when things get to the point where they're a monopoly, either because there's no competition, or they're a monopoly in the sense that they are so powerful that they're becoming more powerful than the U.S. federal government, that the government then has a right to step in. That's what I believe. But then on the other side of the coin, you see people that want to regulate everything. All of a sudden say, oh, no, but the government shouldn't regulate these companies. Why don't they want regulation of social media? Because they understand that social media is pushing their political party and their ideology. So they're perfectly fine with censorship as long as it's against people that they don't like. So That's how this was approached. And so that's what the debate was, going back and forth. And you could watch it for yourself to see what to make of it. But I don't take my position lightly that I'm asking the government to intercede. And I understand the slippery slope argument. But we're talking 16 million votes could be swayed. That's incredible. That is the removal of democracy. If that tool, if that company becomes so powerful that they can sway 20 million votes per election, whoever they pick will win every single time. But one of the things I do want to mention briefly about this topic, and it just blows my mind, is I'll have a debate with anyone. So on the third debate, the third topic, it was basically just me and Dylan Burns. And we're talking about foreign policy, particularly Syria. That was an okay debate because I enjoyed it more, not because I thought I won more. I enjoyed it more because this was a debate where we were both living in reality. We both agreed on the basic set of data, the basic facts we agreed on. And then there was questions of what do we do with those facts? That's the type of conversation that I really enjoy. What becomes frustrating when there are obvious truths that are just flat out denied. And then you're like, I don't even know where to go forward with this. So the argument that ends up being made almost universally against any position I make, the first one is, well, it's a combination, so it's not the first one. It's all about Nazis, baby. I have to pretend that Twitter and YouTube, they're just censoring Nazis. That's what I have to pretend. It's ridiculous. Everybody knows that's not the case. Everyone, they know it. And then there were other, I was like, tech companies overwhelmingly donate to Republicans. No, they don't. Tech companies overwhelmingly lean towards Democrat causes. Did I say Republican? Tech companies donate to Democrats. No, they don't, they'd say. They overwhelmingly support Democrat causes. No, they don't. I'm like, there have been insiders that talked about it being a hostile working environment for conservatives. They laughed. That's what they did. What's so funny about that? Imagine the reverse of that. Oh, if Fox News, liberals come out in Fox News and say, I felt, harassed and harangued for my liberal views. And we were just like, oh, yeah, right. They'd be like, how dare you? But they don't care. We could look up the actual individual donations that come from people that work at social media and see where they go. Over 90% Democrat. Everybody knows it's the truth. Just like everybody knows there's violent riots going on right now. So it's like it's like a purity test or something, a litmus test that you can see. If you're having a discussion with someone and you ask them one of these questions, if you're like, what about riots? And they're like, what riots? That's it. That's the end of the discussion. There's nothing left to say. They're lying. They know about the riots. They know. They might say, well, it's only a few, blah, 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 blah. But if they're just act like they don't know what you're talking about, unless they're from a different country or they're Encino Man that just woke up from, being a caveman in a block of ice, they're full of it. If they're a political streamer, they know. If you're a political streamer who's on Twitch and YouTube and Twitter, you know what's going on about the censorship. You darn well know that everyone that was censored wasn't a Nazi. But they have to pretend. Oh, no, we have to pretend that doesn't exist. And it's just like, oh. It's like pulling teeth. So you're just sitting there, you're like, come on, really? So then you got to go through the data. Let's look at the numbers. And there's another argument that I want to address. So, yeah, just to finish up on this point. So, it's amazing to me to see so many left-wingers say, oh, yes, these companies are terrible scourges. And then at the same point be like, but they should be allowed to, censor conservatives, as long as it's conservatives. And then humorously enough, Bastia, which, let me say this about Bastia. I don't know a lot of these characters' background. I think Bastia probably had the biggest channel of anyone that was on that debate. Before the debate, he seemed like a nice guy, but I think he suffers from something I do sometimes when he gets so into the debate that he's just yelling all the time. Which, I try my best not to do that in a debate. Sometimes I do that when I'm not debating anyone and I'm just here by myself. So I don't know. He went 0 to 100 on the rage meter real quick. And I don't think it was a good look. I just think it was like, okay. You don't look that impressive, at least by yelling. I disagree with his arguments, obviously, but I thought it would have been more persuasive if he just wasn't interrupting and filibustering and yelling the whole time. But who am I, But it's funny, like the left-wingy people, they can acknowledge the terribleness of these corporations, but we don't want them censored if they're censoring conservatives. Bastia himself said we should kick off Nazis and hammer and sickle. And the irony, of course, is Prime K's, whose channel I'm on, is a communist. And Dylan Burns is, I think he would call himself a progressive. I don't know if he'd call himself a communist, but certainly he's had many, 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 many communists on his channel that I've personally seen. So this left-winger, Bastia, is advocating that anyone who platforms a communist or a Nazi should be removed from social media. And yet his counter to me saying, no, the government should regulate is that would kick all of us people on social media off because of overregulation. It's like, but you literally just said you wanted half the panel kicked off. It's just ridiculous. Dan, if you think YouTube's way left, you ought to see Twitch, man. At least the political commentators. And I'm not sure how Twitch itself runs. I've not seen the new Space Jam sneak peek. Space Jam, all joking aside, is my wife's favorite movie ever. So I'm sure I'll see the new Space Jam. So yeah, I BitChute as well, but I don't use it much. Now, what was I going to say? So yeah, this argument, I don't know. It just seems, kick people off that I want kicked off. It's like, okay. No, I get it. There are potentials for government intervention that could run amok. But the system I advocate's real simple. They should lose their protection from that, whatever number law that is. They should lose that protection that allows them to operate as a platform and instead be held accountable to every newspaper, every other place that is held to the account of publisher. Now, what I would like to see that mean is, that doesn't mean if I, on my channel here where I have, 20 people watching on YouTube and a handful of other people on other platforms, that doesn't mean that if I say something, obviously I'm small enough, it's going to be difficult for them to catch it. Like, that makes sense. So I'm not asking them to be watching every little YouTube creator or Instagram creator, blah, blah, blah. And if they say one word out of order, ban them. That's not what I'm suggesting. But if there's a call to violence and YouTube or Twitter or Facebook is routinely made aware of it, and it's obvious that hundreds of people have reported something, and that they then decide to not remove that call to violence because it aligns with them politically, then I think that, yes, those platforms are no longer platforms. They have made a conscious decision to publish. And the reason it's different is if they're a platform, they could make the argument, we don't get involved in that business. People put up what they want. We don't get involved of selectively removing it. But instead what you see is they say, no, we remove conservatives, but we allow Democrats to make those same calls to violence. Such as Carlos Maza, who said throw milkshakes at and assault conservatives so they don't feel comfortable remaining in public. Now that was flagged thousands of times by people and reported to Twitter, yet the tweet remains. That call to violence was okay because it aligned politically with the left, which Twitter's part of. So it was okay to use them to threaten violence. They should be held accountable then if someone could prove that someone read that message and was inspired to violence. They should. Ooh, like smokes. I'm getting tired. So, yeah, that was the deal with like the censorship of social media. And I mean, I don't know. I think that it needs to go. The third topic was just on foreign policy. I don't have much to say on this. I disagree with Dylan on, I thought it was a good discussion. I disagree with Dylan on what's going on in Syria particularly. And his argument is that by Trump pulling the troops out of there, that it put the Kurds at risk, which led to ISIS filling the gap and Turkey was going to commit genocide against the against the Kurds. I just don't understand though the neoliberal position on this, the Joe Biden Kamala Harris position. Here in a nutshell is the position. Okay, so we have to stay in forever war in Syria. We have to stay there because if we pull out, then our NATO ally Turkey, where we station nuclear weapons, will commit genocide against our allies, the Kurds. However, when Donald Trump criticizes NATO, We're against that because all of our NATO allies are so important. So they prop up the genocidal maniacs in Turkey. That's what this pro-war establishment Democrat and Republican do. They prop up the genocidal maniac Erdogan in Turkey, right? So they do that, and then they say, oh, because we're propping up this genocidal maniac, we have to have troops to make sure that they don't go commit genocide. So instead of being upset at the side that did that, you're going to get mad at the side that says, let's bring these troops home. Oh, so you support the genocide. No! That was your party that did that. If you send me a political compass that you acquired from a political compass test, would I be able to explain it for me? I'd try. So, I mean, to me, it's like, I don't understand that position. Look, I think that Dylan personally knows some of the Kurds that were left behind. If my position is this, if any person in a foreign country legitimately helped our military and helped protect U.S. troops, then they should be giving a shot at coming to the United States and becoming a citizen, within reason. I think that's the case. But I also know it's the case that the military-industrial complex and the establishment, every single time that they go to one of these illegal, grotesque foreign regime change wars that kills American soldiers and kills people around the globe, only to enrich them and their rich friends in the Republican and Democrat parties. Every single time that the anti-war people push back and say it's time to come home, they say, we can't come home because this group of people will be negatively affected if we do. Therefore, we have to stay. Dylan, who I respect, and I hope to talk to him more specifically about this issue at some point. Look, Dylan, your argument is exactly why we're still in Afghanistan 20 years later. How long will we leave these troops remain in Syria? 30 years? 40 years? 100 years? Will our great-great-great-great-grandchildren be saying, hey, our Turkish allies, yeah, they're great people. By the way, they're genocidal maniacs. We've had soldiers that have spent their entire lives in Syria. It's cool, though. It's worth it. Because the genocidal maniacs that we're propping up want to kill our allies on the other side. Not to mention all of this ignores the fact that the Biden-Obama administration were doing things like funding radical Islamic terror groups in Syria in the first place. So we back the rebels made up of violent Islamic terrorists. Then we back the Kurds that are trying to fight back against Assad. Then when we decide to pull out and stop supporting Islamic terrorists, the Turks kill the Kurds and ISIS moves in. That's the argument. So do I want to go with the side that backed the genocidal maniac Turks and armed Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, and ISIS in Syria? Or do I want to go with the party that said, let's pull the troops out of here and blame them and say, look, you've just made Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, and ISIS so much stronger? Stronger than the other team that was arming them? And then we have disagreements on whether or not Assad actually gassed his own people, which I've seen credible evidence to suggest that it never happened in the first place. Now, having said that, is there things to complain about Trump's foreign policy? Absolutely. I don't like the bombing of Syria. I don't like the support for the war in Yemen. There's a lot of things. But in general, like all of a sudden now, and I feel that there's this hypocrisy that goes on where it's like, we have to pretend that the disastrous foreign policy under Obama, Biden had no part in, except when he did, supposedly. So on China policy, Joe Biden was rough under Obama, claims my opponent. So when he was vice president, he was rough on Obama. I'm like, okay, when he was vice president, they bombed Libya. So is that part of his foreign policy? Well, actually, he was against that. Okay, well, what about Syria? He arms Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra. Well, now he says, blah, blah, blah. No. Please, you can say you don't like Trump's foreign policy and you prefer Biden, but to pretend that Biden's not a war hawk, please. I'm not buying it. And not to mention, it's clear that China is the biggest geopolitical threat to us internationally. And it's clear that Donald Trump has been harder than any president on China. But my opponent says, no. When it comes to lip service, Joe Biden's been harsher than China. They actually called Trump racist for wanting to stop people from coming in from China with the coronavirus. That's the Joe Biden-Kamala Harris ticket. That's what they did. But they're tough on China. Joe Biden's son was engaged in a $1.1 billion with a B dollar energy deal with China. So Joe Biden, I'm supposed to trust he'll be tough on China while he full well knows his son's out there engaged in multi-billion-dollar deals with the communist government of China. Just like Ukraine. But then by far the best insult was, well, Trump's kind of a moron. Which, okay, fine. When it comes to foreign policy, he kind of doesn't know what he's talking about. All right, I'll get to that in a second. This political compass. So Frost Greek. So I just don't get it. And let's not forget, what went on in Libya? What was that all about? What was Benghazi? What was really going on? Well, what really was going on is they didn't like Gaddafi because he suggested that they start to trade oil in an African dinar and get off the Federal Reserve standard, the dollar standard. And what was going on in Benghazi was, well, we backed the violent Islamic terrorists that overthrew Gaddafi, and then we were running guns to them. That's what was going on. That's what the Obama administration was doing. That's what was happening. So we're gonna go through with that administration some more. In the name of being the pro-peace party, we're gonna put in Joe Biden, who is part of one of the most disastrous, hawkish administrations in history. And then you say that, well, Trump called, one of the presidents Mr. Kurd, and he gets confused and he doesn't know what's going up. That's something my opponent said. We're not looking at Trump in a vacuum. Who's Trump running against again? You want to criticize Trump getting confused? And you think Joe Biden's going to do a better job? The guy doesn't know his sister from his wife. You think he's going to be able to engage in high leverage discussions with diplomatic foes? Come on now. There are reasons to say I like Biden over Trump, but come on. Cognitive ability? You're really going to make that argument? Come on. It's just not, it's ridiculous. So, all right. So one of my viewers on Twitch, let me see if I can pronounce your name. Sophros Greek, says, if I send you a political compass I acquired from a test, would you be able to explain it for me? So let's check it out. Let's see what we got. Maybe, huh? Is that working? All right, let's slide it here. All right. So I'll do my best to explain this. So I assume this dot is where you ranked. So first off, let me say this. I always consider myself more of a libertarian than a conservative. And that's because I'm fiscally and socially conservative, right? So I always put myself more in the libertarian group. Now, I wouldn't be an extreme libertarian, but that's where I found myself. Now, when it says left or right here, I'm not sure what they mean by that. Exactly what they're going with. Now, libertarian or authoritarian, I could get. So here's how I would make a compass if I was going to make it. You have social issues and you have economic issues. And then you have basically government control or no government control. And that would be how I'd make the compass. And I assume that's what they're saying by left and right. I would assume that right wing, their interpretation of that would be economics, and libertarian authoritarian would be social issues. So here's how it works. The two types of issues, and this is obviously a gross oversimplification, but the two types of issues you're looking at are first economic issues. So the question is, how much of your own money should you be allowed to keep versus, well, that would be the libertarian position, you keep it all, versus the authoritarian position, which would say we should take as much as that money as we need to give it to programs to help other people. And so to me, what we colloquially consider it is right wing to be for smaller government economically, right? So we don't want, a right winger would say, we want you to keep as much as your money as possible. We believe in tax cuts. We believe in free market principles. A left winger, when it comes to economic policy, would say, no, we believe in bigger government. We believe in more government programs. Now, both of these in the abstract are good. Like, you could come in through both. I don't want to say good. You could be good-natured in your reason for supporting this. For example, I could say, hey, I really think the government should help poor people, and I'd like to see more programs to help the poor and more programs for the children. That's why I favor bigger taxes. Or you could say, hey, I think people's property is their own. I don't want to see the government taking it. People make better decisions with their money than the government does, so I want to see less taxes. Both of those are noble purposes, right? I tend to believe in the less taxes camp. I don't believe in no social safety net, but I tend to believe that we should have as limited taxation as possible. So when it comes to economics, I consider myself right-wing. I believe in limited government in that extent. So that's the economic. Now, social issues are basically the question of what is the government's role in controlling how we live our lives? Ironically, the right, or Republicans, we see as wanting more control in the way you live your life, whereas the Democrats want less control. So drug regulation. Republicans, it would be the right-wing position to say we want more regulation on drugs. We want more drugs to be illegal. Left-wing position would tend to say, no, we don't want as much. Now, the reason that this breakdown never made sense to me was, why is it that we break people down on these seemingly arbitrary lines of, I'm for big government when it comes economically, but small government when it comes socially, versus small government economic and big government socially? Wouldn't it seem like more people would either be, I'm for small government for both, or I'm for big government for both? That's what never made sense to me. Yeah, libertarian, right, that's what I'm saying, Chris. So libertarian would be, so let's look at the two issues and let's look at the possibilities. So hypothetically, and this is definitely hypothetical, because the way this plays out in real life, when I start to talk about the Republican and Democrat Party, they don't really follow their supposed philosophies. But let's talk about hypothetically what it's supposed to be. So the most authoritarian group would be like the authoritarians. Or you would call them, I don't know, communists would fall into this, I would say fascists, right? And these are people that believe in huge government power in all instances. So they think economically, remember, that's the two questions, socials and economics. So they think economically, yes, government should be planning the economy. So they should take as much as possible from people and then use that for good purposes, allegedly. And socially, they think, yes, the government should tell you how to live your life. It should tell you what's legal, what's illegal, etc. So that would be an authoritarian, right? On the complete opposite end of that would be the libertarian, or an anarchist that believes in no government. But they believe as in limited of a government as possible. So economically, they say, no. The government shouldn't be taking a bunch of people's monies through taxation. They should allow the people to keep it. But socially, they say, no. The government shouldn't tell you prostitution's illegal, or that you don't have the right to put that in your body. The government should stay out of that. That's the exact opposite of the authoritarian. Now, Democrats, therefore, they agree with the authoritarians when it comes to economic policy. They agree, yes, governments should be taking massive taxation and help setting up and plan the economy, right? But when it comes to social issues, they say, but no, the government shouldn't tell you how to live your life. Republicans, on the other hand, make the argument, no, the government should be small and limited. It shouldn't be taking your money, and it shouldn't be trying to plan out the economy. But socially, it believes, yes, we should be making decisions about what's the best values to live your life by. So we should make drugs illegal. We should make prostitution illegal, blah, blah, blah. Thanks, Numex. I really appreciate it. So look, I'm no expert on this type of things. I think that labels are important, but often misused and clunky. And as we see in reality, does it really work out that way? Does the left believe, oh, we should just live and let live, and social policy, we should not have the government intervene that much? Of course not. They're trying to ban the First Amendment and the Second Amendment right now. So clearly, socially, when it comes to those issues, they're for big government. Are Republicans for small government economically? Of course not. They're spending trillions of dollars. So both the Republicans and Democrats fail their own ideological test, but in a nutshell, that's what I think about it. Now, I will say there's one other thing that I've heard. The best way I've heard the difference between the right and the left explained was from someone whose videos I just went back and we're watching some today, is Jordan Peterson. I love Jordan Peterson. I think he's fantastic. That could be, yeah. And oftentimes, Sophros Greek, yeah, those questions, the questionnaires are very difficultly worded. And so you end up getting a result that's maybe surprising to you. And I'll get to that in 1 second. But with Jordan Peterson, this is how he defines the left and the right. He puts it in context of hierarchies. So this sounds confusing. And again, I'm no expert. I'm just an amateur who's read, but very few people I think would be experts on this type of thing. Does everyone know what a hierarchy is? A hierarchy is a societal group that we put ourselves into willingly that says that there are certain people that are higher up than other people. Now, we would like those hierarchies to be on competence. So, for example, we might have a hierarchy. This is something simple. Who is the best basketball player of all time? Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Larry Bird, Dr. J, Wilt the Stilt, etc., right? You can debate, but that's the hierarchy. Certainly, they're all way up here at the tippy top, and then I'm way at the bottom, right? And there's a bunch of people in between, right? So that we understand that hierarchy. But the truth is, there are hierarchies all around us, right? And some for very, very serious things, right? So what happens is we have hierarchies that have to do with just competency, but also have to do with greed. So in life, for example, we have hierarchy when it comes to wealth. You have very rich people and very poor people and a bunch of people in between. But it's not just that the people that have the most money are the smartest people or the most competent people. It could be through corruption. It could be through luck, etc. Everything does that. Who's the best painter? Who's best at getting food? Who's the best parent? Who's right? And this is all happening at an individual and a societal level. But they're all around us. A hierarchy becomes inevitable when humans put value on something. So for the easy example I could come up with is we value food, right? Because we need it to live. So go way back, in tribal days. Someone who would have had a station of importance in that tribe would have been who was best at obtaining food through hunting, through farming, etc. There was automatically a hierarchy play. As soon as we valued food, everyone intrinsically as a human's like, that person's good at it, so they're stationed here. That person's terrible at getting food. They're down here. Now, what makes humanity great is we don't just have one hierarchy. Maybe you're really low on the bottom when it comes to getting food, but you're fantastic when it comes to fighting and driving off foreign enemies. And so then all those hierarchies go into a bigger hierarchy where your station is in life. It sounds really complicated, but all that's important to know is hierarchies are inevitable. Even left-wing people should agree with that. Here's the difference between right and left-wing people. Right-wing people look at the hierarchy and say the hierarchy is inevitable and it's good because we should want to reward and acknowledge and promote people that are good at the specific things that we find important. So it's like the meritocracy. If you're really good at something, you do deserve more. That's true. But the left says, yes, but two things. One, if we don't continually challenge the hierarchies, then we lose sight of just competency and it becomes corrupt. So in other words, it's not the smartest person at that's the president of the university. It's the most corrupt. And so we always have to challenge to make sure we're challenging, to make sure corruption doesn't occur. Because naturally, in any hierarchy, if you don't challenge it, corruption will occur, right? And the second thing is, and we should do our best to take care of the people at the bottom of the hierarchy. In reality, both of those things are true. Both the right and the left wing. Yes, it's true that hierarchies are inevitable and good, but it's also true that we got to be careful and make sure they don't become corrupt and we're helping people at the bottom. Those are both true statements. So in that sense, and I really believe that's the difference between the left and the right, both sides can be good. That's what I truly believe. Now, you could be bad on both sides. You could be such a right-winger that you're like, I don't care about anyone who's not the best. If you failed at life, it's all your fault. Screw you. I don't care. Hit the bricks. Like Ebenezer Scrooge style. That's probably not good. But what I see as a bigger problem, at least in today's world, is people on the left that are going too far. So they're so concerned with the people at the bottom of the hierarchy and claiming that the hierarchy is all corrupt that they want to reject all hierarchies, which is impossible. And what happens when it goes too far on the left? Cambodia, Mao's China, the Soviet Union, millions of Ukrainians starving to death because the hierarchy of who owned the farm was unfair. So you took the farm away from the actual farmers and then realized, whoops, no one knows how to farm and you all starved to death. That's the prevailing problem in our society today. That's why I identify as, right now, the biggest problem is what I see as the extreme left. Right, and it's definitely groupism by race and things like that. Absolutely. Identity politics, cultural Marxism. Absolutely. Which is why they want equity through restorative justice. Exactly. Right? So they say, no, the hierarchy is bad. It's always bad. And so if the outcomes are not equal, then it proves we must reject the hierarchy. But there's consequences to rejecting the hierarchy. For example, let's take the example we could see in Zimbabwe, we saw it in Ukraine, we're starting to see it in South Africa. We could look at the population of people in this country and then divide them up by, we'll just say 2 categories. But once I show you just 2, I want you to remember, instead of dividing up by 2, we could divide them up by 1,000. So we'll just use race and gender. But let's say we could also use sexual orientation, cisgender versus LGBT, right? We could use Christian versus atheist versus Muslim versus Jew. There are literally infinite categories you could separate people into of an immutable characteristic. But we're just going to take 2, and you'll see the problem just with these 2. So let's say we look at the United States population. We break everyone into the following groups. White and black, and then male and female. And then we have white male, white female, black male, black female. Then you throw in Hispanic. Do the same with them. Asian, Jewish, whatever. You have all those groups. So then let's say we break down what is the outlook for us demographically. And so you might come to the conclusion that 30% of our country is white men, and 30% is white women, and 7% is black women, and 6% is black men, and etc. And then you say, okay, all farms in this country must be owned by exactly that percentage of the population. So in other words, if there's 7% black men in this country, 7% of farms in this country must be owned by 7% of black men. That's equality of outcome. What do you think happens to this country the moment we do that? We starve to death. And it's not because different races or different genders are incapable of running the farm. It's that you can't force equality of outcome, because you are then destroying that hierarchy, and you're taking out the people that are most competent to run the farm, and you're totally removing them with people whose competency is not even factored in. Would I take the test on stream? Someday I'll do it. Sure. I don't mind. But that to me is the problem you see. Now, instead of just having equality of outcome just for race and gender, imagine if you did it for all those other categories I was talking about. How's this country going to look? And this is the insanity, right? You hear people on the left, they talk about equality of outcome all the time. Well, the country must be racist because on average, black people make less than white people. And you're like, yeah, but what are the factors goes into why that might be the case? Oh, no. It's racist to look at those factors. Right? Or feminists, you'll hear make this argument a lot. Well, women make less than men. And, in STEM fields, women are only 13% of people in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that's outrageous. And, we need to change that. We need equality of outcome. But they never talk about equality of outcome when it comes to things that favor them, right? So you never hear the people that yell about Fortune 500 companies, right? And how, it's predominantly white people. You never hear them say, and by the way, we need to make sure that only 13% of the NBA is black, right? 67% of the NBA needs to be white. Never hear them make that argument. No one makes the argument, well, clearly the NBA, the fact that it's majoritarily black people, clearly that has to do with racial bias. You want to know why the majority of the NBA is black? Because culturally, it was big in the black community to play basketball, and it's something that doesn't cost a lot of money to do, and that you're able to do in even high population density areas like inner cities, and it's a way out for a lot of people in inner cities to escape the brutal realities of gang violence and things like that, and so they got really competent at it. The reason the majority of the NBA is black, are you ready for this? Is because those are the best players. That's why. That's why it is. When you're in a hyper-competitive activity like that, you just want the best people. I assure you, they're not like some white guy out there that's better than LeBron James, and, all the teams are like, we don't want him, he's white. That guy can play, sign him up. That's the way it would be. Everybody understands this. We know that. No one cares. Great. Fantastic. But it's only, but if we look at Fortune 500 companies, that must be racism. Now I can speak for myself. If you had to ask me, would I rather be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or a star in the NBA? I would easily take the star in the NBA without a doubt. Because one, even if you make more money as the head of the Fortune 500 company, you're certainly just being in the NBA going to make enough money that your life's going to be comfortable. And then aside from that, playing a game that is awesome, having a celebrity status, having a voice, I could tell you all sorts of people in the NBA. I could hardly tell you one Fortune 500 CEO. So why are we always using that marker? And the difference between men and women, it's even more stark. We keep hearing about how we're a patriarchy. If we're a patriarchy and the system's set up by men to benefit men, why are 90% of the people in jail men? Does that make any sense? Well, we need equality of outcomes, right? Not equality of opportunity, equality of outcome. So, if 51% of the population in this country is women, then 51% of prisoners must be women. The nursing field's dominated by women. Does that mean 49% of the nursing field needs to be men? Are you going to go up and tell which nurses they're fired because they're the wrong gender? We never make those arguments, right? Sewage workers, 90-something% are men. We going to force a bunch of women to work in sewage plants? Or be bricklayers? We going to force a bunch of women to... No, they never talk about equalizing outcomes there, do they? It's always just the good stuff, what they view as the good stuff. Homicide victims, overwhelming men. Hey, that proves sexism against men, right? We need to equalize that. Make sure more women are being killed. I mean, it's just stupid. Everybody knows it. Everyone knows. And it's disingenuous. Endernax says, if the goal of the government is to provide services to its people, trying to measure the needs of the people for those services solely based on something as superficial race is insane. Measuring people by race for government services would underserve the people who need it most. Yeah, and I mean, this was the argument that someone who went by the name Penguin came on my channel a while ago. This was the argument that I had with him, right? And it goes something, losing a lot of people. What's going on here? Oh, well. But the argument is, excuse me, just fixing some up here. What ends up happening is when we focus on these immutable characteristics, you lose sight of the actual problem that you're trying to solve. This is exactly what's happening with Black Lives Matter. There is a problem with policing in this country. It's not as big of a problem as people make it out to be, but there certainly are things that need to get better with policing, and there are specific incidents that are atrocious. Of course, that's true. But when you make it a problem about race when it's not necessarily that, then you can never get a solution because you've misidentified the problem, which means any solutions that you suggest are not going to be solving the actual problem. They're going to be solving the problem that didn't exist. And if you believe a problem exists and it doesn't, and then you try to solve that problem, are you going to think that your solution solved the problem? No, because the problem never existed, and if nothing's changed by it, you're going to say, well, the problem persists. So we could see this, for example... what's up? Oh, yeah, no problem. So that's the kind of stuff that you see, but what I was arguing with Penguin is they look at something that they look at as a benefit or a problem, and then they say, that thing's good, therefore we'll find something that potentially leads to that thing and then work for that. So it sounds confusing. Let me give you an easy example, right? Is diversity good or bad? Diversity is good. It is. What is good about diversity? Why is diversity good? Well, the reason diversity is good is because when you have people that have diverse opinions, it allows those opinions to clash, and so the cream rises to the top. That's why diversity is good. But the key is it's diversity of opinions, diversity of thought. That's what's good. Let me ask you this. If all the evidence says diversity is good because it brings different ideas to the table, blah, blah, blah. Let's say you have a company and you have two teams with 10 people in them. And those you're the CEO of the company. So you have team A and team B. And you're like, I want to see which team comes up with the best ideas. Which team do you think would come up with the best ideas? Team A is a team of the most physically diverse people you've ever seen. It's 10 people. You got a black man, a Hispanic woman, a transgender Asian person, someone who was born in Australia. You have, someone that that is on the spectrum with autism, etc. Just 10 of the people that look completely different, right? You got these 10 people. But they all think exactly the same. And then the other team is 10 white guys who disagree on everything. Not in a mean way either. They just all have different opinions on things. Which team do you think is going to end up with the better diversity, with the better diverse ideas coming out of it? I'll answer for you. I think it would be the team that had the diverse opinions. That's the diversity that's good. The reason that we think, oh, a black woman and a white man, that's great diversity. The reason we think that diversity would be good is that we assume, hey, what's up, wife? I'll be done in a second. We assume, oh, they come from diverse backgrounds, so they'll have diverse lived experience and diverse ideas. But not necessarily. So we've identified a characteristic that could lead to the trait we're looking for. It would be like saying this. I'm a quarterback coach, and I'm looking for the type of quarterback I want is someone who could throw the ball the farthest or throw it the hardest, right? And one of the things that could lead to someone who could throw the ball the hardest is that could bench press really good. So I'm just looking for dudes that could all bench press 500 pounds. Now, in walks John Elway, who could only bench 250, but he could throw the ball 90 yards, like 30 yards further than everyone else. And you're like, nope, sorry, your arms aren't big enough, get out. Why would you do that? Clearly, the arm thing was just leading to the ultimate goal of who could throw the ball the furthest. So if the guy comes in who disproves your assumption and he can throw the ball the furthest, you wouldn't say, oh, no. It's the same with diversity. If your assumption is, oh, people from differing skin colors, ethnicities, genders, sexual preferences, etc., will have diversity of opinions, but they don't, and meanwhile, a bunch of people that look the same do have diverse opinions, it's the diverse opinions you're after. That's what you want. Now, it is true that oftentimes having people of different backgrounds lead to diverse. And right, that's true, Joe. Diversity is pushed as an anti-white. That's exactly what it's pushed as. Exactly. But that's the point I'm making. Because then what happens is, because we focus so much on, so look at it, it's like a stage. We want diversity of opinion, and so one of the ways we might get there is by having people that look different. But there's all kinds of ways you might get to diverse opinion. You might get diverse opinion from people that different economic status. You might get diverse opinion from people that went to different schools. You might get diverse opinion from people that have different hobbies. Whatever. Who cares how you get there? You just want the diverse opinions. You don't give up on the diverse opinions for the thing down here that you thought would lead to it. And so what we see is in academia and all over the place with these woke leftists is they're all about pushing for diversity of how you look as long as you all think the same. That's why they attack someone like Candace Owens or Kanye West. Or Ben Carson. Or that's why they attack women that they don't see as Democrats. That's why Joe Biden said, you're not really black if you don't vote for me. This is what they're saying without saying it. They don't believe in diversity. They believe in cultural Marxism. They believe in judging you by the color of your skin. So when they talk about the benefits of diversity, they're lying. They don't believe in the benefits of diversity because they want to censor and cancel anyone who disagrees with them. And your thoughts and the diversity of them are the only diversity that matters. I'm trying to do video of my wife and my dogs fighting in there. So I'm wrapping up here. Oh my goodness, Sammy's. Yeah, fat guy got to go eat a sandwich here. But that's what's going on. And so that's one of the things you'll see. It's the same way. So that's when it comes to diversity. It's the same way what we see with kind of the idea of that. The reason I bring it up is my discussion I was having about Black Lives Matter and about white privilege. What is white privilege? Well, white privilege is, if you're white, then the chances are that you got your life's not going to be as crappy based on your skin color because blah, blah, blah. And you had a better chance to have more economic success and stuff because your ancestors, blah, 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 blah. So we need to then, when we look at education opportunities and things like that, well, it's a shame that that there's so many poor people that don't get these opportunities and black people are more disproportionately poor. Therefore, we need affirmative action to help black people. Why? Why wouldn't you just have affirmative action to help poor people? If being poor is the problem, why wouldn't we just solve being poor? Why would we solve one step below that where it's like, if you're black, you're more likely to be poor. And being poor is a problem. Therefore, we'll just focus on black people. But then that makes two huge mistakes right out of the gate. One, that means that anyone who's not black that's poor gets left behind. And second, it means anyone who's not poor but black gets a benefit. So why wouldn't you just say, hey, we're going to just help poor people? What's the harm in that? Well, more black people are disproportionately poor. Okay, if that's true, which, okay, sure. Wouldn't helping poor people disproportionately help black people then? Let's just say, hypothetically, anyone who makes less than $40,000 a year, we were going to send a $50,000 check to. This is a terrible idea. But let's just say, hypothetically, that was the case, right? And of people that make $40,000 or less a year, let's say 40% of them are black, despite only being 13% of the population. So my policy that I just suggested would by far disproportionately help black people. Would it not? Black people, 13% of the population, but 40% of the people receiving these checks. Right? But that's okay, because if you're poor and you're white or Asian or Hispanic, you also got the check. So it helped poor people. Now, let's do it the Democrat way. Instead of saying we think people that make under $40,000 should get a check, they say black people are more likely to get under $40,000. Therefore, we're going to send them all a $50,000 check. Now, did the poor white guy or the poor Asian or the poor Hispanic get that check? Nope. They're still poor. Did LeBron James get that check? Yep, he's black. Why would you prefer that system? Oh, yeah, Peggy McIntosh is unpacking the invisible knapsack. Yeah, I've dealt with it many a time. Of course, no evidence for her claims. And it was very similar to this weekend. Someone in the debate community, when he was asked to define white privilege, the best he could come up with was, if you go to Walgreens and get a Band-Aid, you'll get one that looks like you. I don't know if you guys have seen my wife, but if we found a Band-Aid that was her skin color, it would look like the one on Nellie's cheek. I mean, it's stupid.
I'm pretty pasty.
So, I mean, it's just dumb. But that's what's going on. Like, this focus on race and stuff like that, it's terrible. It always leads. And then there's all sorts of other things. You have people doing it in bad faith because they want to attack white people or Asian people. We see Yale now actively discriminating against whites and Asians. We see in California, Kamala Harris and the Democrats trying to overturn Proposition 209 that says that the government shouldn't hire people based on race or gender. They want the government to hire people based on race or gender. Now, which ideology is the ideology of judge people by the content of their character and not their skin? That's me. That's our ideology. That's not them. So, all right, I gotta go. My sandwich is gonna get cold. Bub Sub. They don't know Bub Sub. Let me just shout out real quick that if you need life insurance, please get in touch with me. Thank you to everyone who donated. I really, 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 really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that watched me. I really apologize that, I kind of don't have a schedule anymore, but, it is what it is. So, just find me when you can. I'm at Normal America on almost every platform, so check me out there. If you like my stuff and you didn't, and you can't subscribe or you can't donate money, totally get it. I'm broke too. So no problem whatsoever. Maybe consider recommending me to some other people if you'd like. That's something you could do to help me out. You can email me at rob.nor@gmail.com if you have anything. And if you want life insurance, please get a hold of me. I would love to sell some to you. Even if you don't buy from me, I'd love to talk to you about the importance of it and things like that. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate all of you. I'm going to go shovel food. What was that lady's name that was picking on me at the beginning? Let's see if I can find it. It was Courtney Nord. No, it was Annie Crisbendi, who said something about bollocks, but also called me a fat, lazy American slob. So I'm going to go be a fat, lazy American slob and enjoy my sandwich. So thank you so much, everyone. As always, have a good one.